Cancer loves acid. Cancer also loves no oxygen. The other thing cancer loves is sugar.
An internationally renowned health teacher, Barbara O'Neill, shared 7 alkaline-forming foods that we should mainly consume to keep cancer away from our body. In this video, we will learn from Barbara on 8 acid-forming foods we should try to avoid in order to provide a healthy environment for our body to naturally protect against cancer and other diseases. As a reminder, let's quickly hear about why we should always maintain a healthy pH balance for our body.
The pH of the human body is important because at different pHs, diseases grow, and at different pHs, it's very hard for disease to grow. And blood's reading on the pH scale is between 7.35 and 7.4. But in a cellular pH of 5.5, this is where disease thrives, especially yeasts, funguses, and cancer. Cancer loves acid. Cancer also loves no oxygen. The other thing cancer loves is sugar. And so when people come to us wanting help to conquer cancer, you see what we do? We suggest a diet that's highly alkalizing. We suggest ways to oxygenate the body, and we also greatly eliminate the glucose, the sugars going into the body.
Since we have already looked into 7 alkaline foods we should eat, we will now go straight into 8 acid-forming foods we should avoid. First, what does it mean by acid-forming foods?
Let's have a look at acid-forming foods now. These acid-forming foods are high in the acid-forming minerals, which is phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine. So what foods are high in phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine?
First is meat.
So what foods are high in phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine? Meat. This explains why Dr. Colin Campbell found he could turn cancer cells on and off like a switch by the amount of meat and dairy products he was giving the rats.
So red meat and processed meat are the most common acidic foods in the Western diet. Red meat is high in protein and phosphorus, thus increasing the amount of acid in the diet. Next is wheat.
The hybridized wheat, the hybridization of the wheat created a lot more of the acid-forming minerals.
Since wheat is such an important ingredient to most of our diet, let's go deeper into the actual problem with the wheat.
The original wheat that God made is called Enkenhorn, or some call it just Enkhorn. And that original wheat had a very fragile protein or gluten structure. It is not sure when, but they estimate a couple of thousand years ago, Enkenhorn did a wild hybrid with a field grass and came up with the Emma strain of wheat. Its structure, its protein or gluten structure is not as fragile, but it's still fairly fragile. And in the 1950s, it was the Emma strain of wheat that was put through intensive crossbreeding. And it came up with the hybridized wheat that we know today. That hybridization of the wheat created an incredibly complex gluten or protein structure. Today, we're looking at how the hybridization process changed the gluten or the protein structure. And it's almost only a cast iron gut that can break down that very complex protein or gluten structure. That explains why so many people are gluten intolerant today. By the 1990s, every pasta, every pizza, every biscuit, cake, cookie, donut, cereal, bread, it's all made out of the hybridized wheat. You see, the farmers love it, and I don't blame them for loving it because they get 6 times more grain per acre. It was zoomed through to help with the starvation crisis in the world, and safety studies were never done. This explains the gluten intolerance that we see today. The 2 most common symptoms of a gluten intolerance is brain fog and bloating.
Third acid, forming food on the list is caffeine.
Caffeine, all your caffeine foods and drinks have an acid effect.
All your caffeine foods and drinks have an acid effect. An imbalanced diet high in acidic foods such as animal protein caffeine and processed foods puts pressure on the body's regulating systems to maintain the pH neutrality in the body. The extra buffering required can deplete the body of alkaline minerals such as sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, making the person prone to chronic and degenerative diseases. So it is important to consume in moderation.
And of course, caffeine usually comes hand in hand with the sugar, which certainly ups it. And remember our 2.6 Coca-Cola, that's a combination of the caffeine and the sugar. 2.6, this is where Coca-Cola sits. It's a killer, it's toxic.
So next, you wouldn't be surprised to find refined sugar is on our list. Refined sugar, it's very acid-forming. While sugar in itself is completely pH neutral at pH 7, sugar is considered an acid-forming food because of how it affects the body's pH balance during metabolism. When sugar is consumed, it is metabolized primarily by the liver, producing metabolic byproducts such as lactic acid and acetic acid, which increase the body's acid load. Additionally, sugar metabolism depletes alkaline minerals like calcium, magnesium, and potassium, which are essential for buffering and neutralizing acids. High sugar intake also stimulates insulin release, which can lead to the excretion of these minerals through urine, further contributing to acidity. Moreover, sugar alters the gut microbiome by promoting the growth of acid, producing bacteria adding to the acid burden. Finally, sugar-induced inflammation produces acidic byproducts, exacerbating the overall acidic environment in the body. Surprising food you find on the list is aged cheese.
Aged cheese, what's the blue in the blue vein cheese? The blue in the blue vein cheese is mold. So the only cheeses that don't sit under that category, the cheeses that have probably a pH of 7 would be your fresh. So that's your cottage, your ricotta. I'm not saying that they are okay because usually they come from cows who have not been fed right or have chemicals in them.
Dairy products are generally considered to be acid-forming foods. This classification is based on the concept of potential renal acid load P, which measures the acid or alkaline effect of food on the body after digestion, and metabolism foods that are high in protein and phosphorus, such as dairy products, tend to be acid-forming. When these foods are metabolized, they produce acidic compounds that must be neutralized or excreted by the body. This can lead to a higher acid load on the kidneys. Here are a few examples of how common dairy products are classified in terms of their acid. Forming potential: milk, slightly acid-forming; cheese, moderately to strongly acid-forming, depending on the type yogurt. Slightly acid-forming. It's important to note that the acid-forming or alkaline-forming properties of food do not necessarily indicate their health benefits or drawbacks. A balanced diet that includes both acid-forming and alkaline-forming foods is typically recommended for overall health.
Next is alcohol.
Alcohol is not a food, but it creates an acid environment in the body. Tobacco is not a food, but it also creates an acid environment in the body. Alcohol breaks down in the body to acetaldehyde, and acetaldehyde is a neurotoxin. We don't want a neurotoxin. A neurotoxin is a brain killer.
So should you eliminate all acid-forming foods? The good news is that you don't have to avoid altogether.
To maintain the 6.5 environment, we need to be consuming 20% acid-forming foods and 80%, 70 to 80% alkaline-forming foods. And I'm sure you're not surprised to hear me say that the 20% should come from this section here.
Grains, legumes, and nuts. Within these groups, many items are acid-forming foods. Grains.
All your other grains, other than the grains that sit on the alkaline side.
Legumes.
All your other legumes, other than the lima, lentil and soy.
Nuts.
And all your other nuts, other than the almond and Brazil, have an acid effect.
Thanks for watching this video today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more health tips and wellness advice. Share this video with friends and family to help spread the knowledge. Stay healthy and see you next time.